Grandson of the Holy Emperor is a Necromancer. Chapter 1, 001. Prologue. Chapter 1, 001. Prologue. Life could be so unpredictable. I mean, who could have guessed that you'd just suddenly die from a VR game project you participated in with the simple hopes of making some pocket change? This stinging sensation alongside the smell of cooked flesh, yup, this was definitely an electrocution. By the time I lost consciousness and woke back up again, I was already possessing a different body. Was this reincarnation? Maybe possession? I couldn't really tell. However, one thing I knew for sure was that the class 1 picked for the game testing, Necromancer, became my current profession. What's worse was that I now lived in a theocracy where the Holy Emperor set the laws. It seemed that I became the Magnani, grandson of the Holy Emperor himself. I'm FCKED. Less than 001. Prologue, Fin. Grandson of the Holy Emperor is a Necromancer. Chapter 2, 002. Imperial Prince is a Gravekeeper 1, Part 1. Chapter 2, 002. Imperial Prince is a Gravekeeper 1, Part 1. Even though this was during the middle of the day, greyish, chilly fog was blanketing everything the eyes could see. I gripped the shovel real tight and slammed it hard against the ground. Sweat trickled down as I panted heavily. My whole body felt heavy like a soaked sponge. I glanced at my side towards the wagon filled with corpses. I was currently burying them underground. Anyone unfamiliar with this site might think that they ran into a horrifying scene of mass murder. Regrettably, though, that wasn't the case. Yup, being a gravekeeper is no picnic at all. Indeed, I was working as a gravekeeper. Chilly atmosphere enveloped the entire graveyard. I shifted my gaze towards a derelict monastery on the verge of collapsing. In this northern region covered by snow 365 days a year, the land of the dead spirits where rotting corpses and various undeads rampaged about, I was spending my days as the exiled Imperial Prince. If you asked who possessed the absolute authority in this continent, then people would most likely point at just one man. He was the king of humanity. An existence that even the lofty emperors had to be respectful and mindful of. He, in a nutshell, was the Holy Emperor, also referred to as God's emissary. Anyone who inherited the Holy Emperor's bloodline would be treated as a person blessed with a noble lineage. Too bad my situation was somewhat different from that. Banishment is it? I clicked my tongue as I stared at the side of the graveyard. The weather might have been chilly, but flies still buzzed around the corpses atop the wagon, with maggots crawling all over said corpses as their companions. I hoisted the shovel on my shoulder, a bitter grin etched on my lips. Why did it have to be this particular body, though? I wasn't sure whether this was a reincarnation or a possession, but what mattered here was the fact that the owner of this body had been banished to this place, the land of the dead spirits. He was then given the job of a gravekeeper here. The reason was pretty simple: he was a complete trash, a maggot no one wanted to be associated with. Honestly speaking, this body's original memories didn't exist anymore. However, I would still hear some stories about this body's past on occasion. For example, while walking around the Imperial Palace, he felt quite bored, and so, he summoned a servant only to kick and slap the living hell out of the poor person. Another one includes him spotting a servant girl walking around and sexually assaulting her, or he'd mercilessly beat up a tutor coming to teach him just because he got bored again. Sure, a portion of aristocrats would also do something like this. It also means that such a simple reason couldn't have warranted a banishment for the Imperial Prince and become a gravekeeper here. The actual reason why he got banished to not just a regular frontier region, but to a very dangerous one at that, even becoming a gravekeeper was blasphemy, that's what. The libido of the Holy Emperor's grandson had awakened and he tried to rape a certain esteemed daughter of a noble, one who came to the Theocratic Empire to train to become a lady-in-waiting. During the deed itself, he was discovered by an archbishop who came to pay his respects to the Holy Emperor. Now normally. TSK. That Magnani is causing yet another incident. That's where the matter should have ended along with the archbishop stopping the youth. However, the problem was that the lady-in-training happened to be the granddaughter of the same archbishop who discovered the deed midway. The granddaughter he sent to the Imperial Palace to learn refinement and etiquette was about to be raped, and he got to personally witness that sorry sight. Of course, the archbishop flipped his lid. Unsurprisingly, the incident of the archbishop using his crozier to beat the living daylights out of the imperial grandson at the time occurred. Both of them were summoned before the Holy Emperor right away. One could say that the next most powerful person besides the cardinal was the archbishop, but such a thing wouldn't matter after beating up the Holy Emperor's grandson. However, as the grandson was also guilty in this case, both were punished with 2 months of house arrest. Things seemed to have calmed down with the case now closed, but then he dared to hit me. The immature boy of 15 years old sneaked into the archbishop's quarters and proceeded to burn his holy scriptures. He broke the cross and then painted the wall with large letters that read, "A lowly bastard who sleeps with goddess Gaia." Despite him living in a theocratic system, and on top of that, he was even the Holy Emperor's grandson, and yet he dared to blaspheme. What a crazy and reckless fool he was. Thanks to that, the Holy Emperor's pent-up rage exploded and he promptly banished his grandson to the land of the dead spirits up north. The imperial grandson's authority and status were stripped away from him, and he was even ordered to perform services to the village there. Mourn for the dead and improve yourself that way. This was probably what the Holy Emperor was thinking at the time. While in post-banishment, the influence the boy possessed as the potential successor of the Holy Emperor vanished too. He didn't even have any escorts anymore. It was easy to guess what the Emperor's intentions were. He wouldn't give a damn even if the boy got kidnapped by another country, or his life was endangered by something else in this dangerous land. Basically, the Holy Emperor had abandoned the boy. Even then, suicide is just not on, dude. The grandson, while full of dissatisfaction, headed to a nearby village and went on a rampage. He acted like an arse and not even a day later, paladins came to visit him. The imperial grandson got subdued in an instant. He was then imprisoned inside the monastery with nothing but prayers and water as his nourishment. After that day, the boy became truly enraged. This is unfair. Too unfair. How dare those lowly things? This whole thing must have been completely unacceptable when viewed from the perspective of an once lofty imperial grandson. Then again, he got banished to some backwoods to lag around corpses and shovel the ground. He probably couldn't see a better future anymore. Was that the reason why he did it? By the time I gained consciousness, I was already flailing about in a noose around my neck after he hanged himself. Indeed, the Holy Emperor's dumb grandson complained about his sad fate and tried to kill himself. Well, it doesn't matter now, does it? That was all in the past now. It wasn't something I should particularly worry about anyway. This body had now become mine and my second life had begun. However, it would have been nice to live the life of a gold spoon in the imperial palace. But well, living as a gravekeeper wasn't so bad either. Actually, this suited my personality better. Maybe because of the profession, Necromancer, that I chose in the game I was playing for my part-time work in the previous life, I didn't really feel any repulsion when handling all these corpses. Hell, I was even okay with all the dreary, gloomy fog and the still silence, as well as the lingering stench wafting around here. I sincerely pray that I'm not some loon who loves to spend time with dead bodies. I muttered to myself as I glanced at the corpses. There was something really odd about me, though. For sure, a necromancer was a magician-type profession that used demonic energy to rule over death. But now, it felt like the characteristics of this particular profession had been altered somewhat. I glanced around the vicinity. After confirming that no one was around, I cautiously touched one of the corpses. Suddenly, the body that was ready to be buried emitted white light, and sure enough, it began standing back up on its feet while creaking like a wooden doll. Oh, ooh. Rotting flesh, empty eye sockets, and even the unmistakable stagger. This was, without a doubt, a zombie. Yes, it was definitely a zombie, but I frowned deeply while looking at such a creature. Why do you possess divinity though? Forget about the aura of death, this zombie was overflowing with the aura of life instead. It was a zombie overflowing with divinity. The necromancy skills I possessed were Resurrection of the Dead, Dead Spirit Soldier, Plague of Debilitation, Swamp of Death, and Horrifying Curse. As for my sundry passive skills, I also boasted the Mind's Eye, and Translation, etc. I possessed a couple of other skills, but it seemed that I couldn't use them yet. I wasn't able to remember them at all. However, they sometimes flitted in and out of my mind, so I merely thought that it depended on my proficiency with my current skills in order to activate them. In the case of my necromancy skills, they display effects closely related to all things life-related. For instance, if I summoned zombies or skeletons, the ones appearing would be filled with divinity and not the normal demonic energy. The Plague and the Curse skills actually granted blessings, all the while the Swamp of Death actually summoned a pit filled with holy water. All these skills that foretold one's death had now been altered to ones that bestowed life. The reason for that must be, it's probably this body's fault. I took a closer look at my current body. Rather than demonic energy, it was brimming with divinity instead. Even though he was a complete arsehole and possessed not a shred of faith in his bones, he was still blessed with a sizable amount of divinity because he was the grandson of the Holy Emperor. I wasn't sure what the levels of other priests were like around these parts, but this body's divinity was probably about average in his age group. Sir Imperial Prince Nim, Your Highness. A voice called out to me from beyond the foggy footpath. I looked back to discover two men, both seemingly farmers, fumbling about while making their way out of the forest's narrow path. grandson of the Holy Emperor, is a Necromancer. Chapter 3, 002. Imperial Prince is a Gravekeeper 1, Part 2. Chapter 3, 002. Imperial Prince is a Gravekeeper 1, Part 2. They were wearing masks, and with some difficulty, lugging around a corpse. I was so preoccupied with what I was doing that I failed to notice them approaching me. Go inside. The divinity-filled zombie wiggled about and reacted to my words. It willingly entered the pit on the ground and comfortably laid down. As an added bonus, it even began dragging in the surrounding earth to bury itself. I took care of the remaining soil scattered about. I grunted heavily as I closed up the ground and carefully hardened it. Nice. While feeling satisfied, I sneaked a glance at the farmers approaching me. "Huh. Weren't you with someone just now, sir?" "Nope." I shook my head to deny what he said. It'd be wiser to keep the villagers in the dark about the undead. Could you even imagine the kind of reactions it would cause if the Holy Emperor's grandson was seen hanging around the zombies? The Holy Emperor's 7th grandson has grown disheartened by his fate and signed a contract with the devil. I somehow managed to, miraculously, survive the suicide attempt, but now I was controlling zombies. A heresy inquisitor might really get dispatched here immediately. It'd be rather difficult trying to convince the priests of the Holy Emperor's kingdom, when they only believed in what they wanted to believe. So, Sir Imperial Prince Nim. UHM. As for me, I was referred to as either the Imperial Prince or the 7th Prince. Originally, I should have been referred to as the Imperial Grandson, Huang's son. But the thing was, the Holy Emperor's son, my father, who was the first in line for the throne, had already ascended to the seat. But then he promptly went missing afterward. So, my current title was apparently the Imperial Prince. We greet your highness, the Imperial Prince Nim. There was no way that a couple of villagers from the sticks would know anything about decorum or etiquette. The two farmers belatedly bowed their heads a little as the greeting. For some reason, they seemed to be minding my mood too. The original owner of this body must have thrown an almighty tantrum after such greetings were offered in his way. Probably. I actually preferred these simpler greetings though. Besides that, I also had no clue as to what the established decorum or etiquette was myself, so I was in no position to demand that from these two. I pointed at the corpse they brought in with my chin and spoke to the farmers. "What is that now?" Feeling a bit fatigued, I stabbed the shovel on the ground and leaned against it. The farmers quickly explained the story behind the dead body. "You see, sir, my neighbor Baron died from the plague. It was so terrible. I'm worried about us getting infected by the plague ourselves and die later." "You didn't cremate the body," I said in pure dissatisfaction, causing the farmers to stare at each other. They then replied with awkward expressions. "Well, it's a bit. Even though we weren't that close, we still said good mornings to each other every day, so we figured that he should at least get a decent burial. You see, we heard that a simple purification ceremony is enough to let us bury him as an intact corpse. We got tasked with this job recently, so we don't know much about the finer details on what we should do, sir. How should we even cremate?" I glared at them with eyes filled with dissatisfaction as I raised myself up. It'd be fine to cremate the body and bring only the ashes, but these villagers seemed to be rather disinclined to harm the corpses. Perhaps it was due to the affection they felt towards one another when the dead body was still alive or something. Obviously, the number of things I had to do would increase because of this, but oh well. I raised my shovel up high, and then I glared at the farmers. The farmers flinched in surprise and backtracked in a hurry. Imperial Prince Nim. One farmer was panicking, while I told you his old habit is still there. He didn't change after his suic. The other farmer was shouting loudly, his complexion ashen white. They probably thought that my shovel was aimed at them. It was then. Kuo. The corpse wrapped tightly in fabric suddenly wreathed and began moving. It extended its hand out and grabbed one of the farmers. Its cheeks were torn open and its mouth was split wide as if its jaw wanted to fall off. Just before the damn thing could take a bite out of the farmer's neck, my shovel sliced down. The edges of the farming tool slammed into the animated corpse's head. Heek. The farmers got the shock of their lives and ended up falling on their asses. I lightly dusted my hand and spoke. "I keep telling you people." Raising the shovel again, I performed the kill confirm strike. A rather bone-chilling noise issued out. If you don't cremate the corpse, it'll turn into a zombie in 3-4 days. This world was rather unique in that way. I wasn't sure about a bustling city, but the thing was, when a person died near negative spots, such as somewhere out in the remote rural areas, some gloomy forest, or even in the middle of a battlefield, there was a 1 out of 10 chance he or she would be revived as a zombie. It was like the standard rule of this world or some such. And the ones tasked with dealing such zombies among the villagers were called hunters, gravekeepers, or the priests. The negative spot, found in the surrounding vicinity of the land of the dead spirits, was especially strong. However, this was also probably because this was the final resting ground of the Necromancer King, the one who turned the continent into an ocean of death in the past. Thanks to that, anyone who died in this place had about a 50% chance of turning into an undead. The villagers already knew about this, and yet their dumb beliefs meant they were reluctant to cremate the dead with their own hands. Their reasoning was quite simple: a superstition about getting cursed themselves. I wiped the sweat off my forehead and then drank some water out of the leather waterskin attached to my hips. Whatever. Thanks for your hard work. You may go now. I waved my hand dismissively. The two farmers swallowed nervously as they stood back up. They then studied each other's moods before quietly opening their mouths. Excuse me, Sir Imperial Prince. What now? I stared at them as I drank some more water. I, Imperial Prince Nim, sir, you're a priest in a way, yes. I don't know crap about being a priest or not, but I'm the grandson of the Holy Emperor, sure. I'm just the grandson of a man who enjoys the authority of an emperor and a pope at the same time. Well, that's what I was on the outside. Ah, I forgot about the divinity inside me. In that case, is it possible for you to bless us so that we don't get infected by the plague? I looked at them with a less than impressed glare. What the hell were they on about? There's no way you wouldn't get infected by the plague with something like that. Do you think that it's some sort of vaccination? Besides, I didn't even possess such skills either. I wasn't even a priest, but a damn necromancer, so why the hell? I shook my head as a response to their request, but the farmers didn't give up so easily. Even if it's just a simple baptism. They held hands and begged, their expressions serious and earnest. The plague doing the rounds in this area lately must have been pretty grave. But then again, that had to be since corpses were frequently being brought into the graveyard. The appeal that the villagers sent to a nearby feudal lord must have fallen on deaf ears. At this rate, it wouldn't be strange to see a whole village disappear. What do you mean by baptism? I've never done anything like that before. Please don't be like that. These farmers seemed to be under the assumption that I wasn't helping them out because I couldn't be bothered about their fate. They rummaged through their pockets and fished out a handful of coins before presenting me with those. This isn't much, but please. Indeed, it was literally a pocket change that a little kid might carry around. I alternated my gaze between the two farmers, and they looked back at me with pleading faces. I spat out a lengthy groan. If that can put your minds at ease. Even though I said that, I still didn't know how to perform a baptism or whatever. I mean, when would I have ever had the chance to do something like that? I tried to recall what I saw in passing from TV in my previous life. I poured a little bit of water from the waterskin at the two farmers. After drawing a sloppy cross in the air, I mumbled out. So. Amen. Even if it was just for show, I thought it'd be discourteous not to do it. Originally, one would have to spray around holy water and recite the holy scripture, but as I didn't know how to do that, I decided to just gloss over the finer details. When the farmers saw how sloppy I was, they sighed under their breaths. But still, they gathered their hands and offered their prayers. We pray that Gaia's blessing will be with us. It was exactly then. You have blessed your target. But how? Less than 002. Imperial Prince is a Gravekeeper 1, Part 1 and 2, greater than Finn. Grandson of the Holy Emperor is a Necromancer Chapter 4, 003. Imperial Prince is a Gravekeeper -2. Chapter 4, 003. Imperial Prince is a Gravekeeper -2. As I studied the distancing backs of the two farmers, the mind's eye skill showed me the current conditions. Name, Grill. Age, 35. Speciality, farming. Physical labor. Plus currently in a blessed state. There it was, the status info so short that someone who couldn't be bothered to must have written it. However, I shouldn't be worrying about that right now. Blessed. I only drew a cross with my fingers and said, Amen, though. Despite my actions that could be construed as sacrilegious, the divinity inside my body still leaked out and the skill activated on its own. More importantly, though, I didn't possess any skill called blessing. I sank into a deep contemplation before remembering a certain skill. Horrifying curse. Damage a target for a prolonged time by inflicting pain. It seemed that its attribute had been flipped on its head. Well, it shouldn't pose any problems later, right? What could possibly happen, anyway? I mean, it wasn't a curse but a blessing, so it should be fine. Even rotting food would serve as medicine if you don't get sick after eating it. If you didn't die after getting hit by magic, it would be a blessing in and of itself. If something really did go wrong, they would surely seek me out right away. With these thoughts in mind, I decided not to worry about the matter anymore. I was a gravekeeper. The priest that maintained the monastery, buried the dead, and performed the purification ceremony. Indeed, there was no need for me to sweat over the ongoings of the outside world. Right. No need to mind the outside world. My job was to simply start shoveling, dump the maggot-infested corpses inside the burial pits, and then perform the purification ceremony so no one would turn into zombies. That's it. I felt no dissatisfaction towards what I had to do. In fact, I didn't feel any repulsion towards the dead bodies, which probably had something to do with the effects of my profession, Necromancer. This job was even rewarding in its own way and could be fun at times too. However, this ain't it. Imperial Prince Nim. Imperial Prince Nim. The farmers from before had shown up again while pulling a wagon with great difficulty this time. However, the wagon was now carrying 4 or 5 corpses instead of one body they lugged around previously. The accompanying flies and wriggling maggots were simply an additional bonus. I fell into despair after seeing that wagon. God damn it, there's more. Each of the bodies weighed at least somewhere between 50 to 60 kilos. Digging the burial pits and moving the corpses were easy, since I could just turn them into zombies and make them do all the hard work. Afterwards, all I had to do was close the graves and perform the perfunctory purification ceremony. That's it. It was possible to take care of everything so effortlessly, but I couldn't utilize my skills at all thanks to the farmers that kept paying me a visit far too often. In the end, I had to shovel, and then shovel some more. On top of that, I now had to lug around the bodies and perform the burial properly. This had to be the zenith of all hard labors in this world, period. God damn it, to think that the Holy Emperor's grandson, supposedly beloved by the gods, had to perform such stupidly hardcore labor. This didn't make an iota of sense. Ah, the highest esteemed goddess of love and mercy, Gaia. Have we become sworn enemies now? I inwardly threw curses and insults in the direction of the goddess that the theocratic empire worshipped. While doing so, I flinched greatly as I stared at the corpses. How many days has it been since they died? Pardon. Oh, maybe 3 or 4 days. What about the cremation? As you can see, we didn't do it. The wagon suddenly began bucking wildly. And then, 3 zombies promptly stood up. Coo-oh. While spitting out phlegm-filled roars, the zombies tumbled down from the wagon. Awak. The farmers cried out in panic. I became utterly speechless by this scene. Hell, I was even tempted to pretend that I noticed nothing and ignore them for now. Why was I given this gravekeeper job? Being thrown into the army would have been more preferable than this. I groaned under my breath as I wielded the shovel still in my grasp. Then, I began smacking the heads of the zombies. The first blow, second, and then, the third. Zombies collapsed as their heads exploded. Blood splattered on my face. I scowled reflexively at this. After wiping the blood away with the back of my hand, I lifted up the unmoving bodies. DMN it, this was still a part of my job. If only my profession was a warrior or a barbarian. However, my current job was that of a necromancer. The profession that was at the height of sneaky cheapness, one that simply threw a bunch of zombies and skeletons out there and watched them fight for you. Such was the characteristic of this dark magic profession, meaning there was no way that my strength stat would be any good. I definitely had a weak-ass priest's physique. But my muscles and stamina were built up a bit by all the shoveling exercise I've done lately, which barely managed to prop me up until now. Even if we're dealing with zombies, I'll still feel bad if they're damaged like this, you know. I tossed the corpse with the busted head down the burial pit. The farmers helped me too, sweat trickling down their faces. Soon, most of the work was done. Feeling tired, I sat down on a tombstone that hadn't been set in place yet. While pretending to pull something out from a leather bag, I accessed my item window. I pulled out a boiled potato and took a bite out of it, with bloodied hands and all. This couldn't really be helped, though trying to wash myself before eating every time would be a waste of time. Also, this body must have been sturdier than I thought, or maybe I should thank the divinity inside me. I hadn't fallen ill once after occupying this body. Excuse me. It was then that the farmers, finished with their quest to help me in my work, suddenly addressed me. They exchanged glances with each other as if they were scared of the sudden change in my mood, and then, they cautiously opened their mouths. It's like the village has been cursed by an evil spirit. Because, how can a plague like this one be? An evil spirit? That wasn't even funny, dude. Looks like these gullible fools got suckered into believing yet another baseless superstition here. Well, Imperial Prince Nim. You're a priest, aren't you? How about exorcising the evil spirit from the village? Son of a gun. They were now asking me to become an exorcist too. I frowned heavily towards the farmers as I spoke. I'm telling you this right now, I'm a priest only in name. And yet, you want someone like that to exorcise evil spirits? Say something that makes sense, will ya? Unfortunately, my job description meant that I couldn't refuse them. As long as I possessed divinity, I should be able to defeat all the undead in this place. However, this was a really cruel thing to ask from a 15-year-old boy. And sir, shouldn't requesting the paladins that showed up like clockwork every month the smarter thing to do here? Besides, I'm only 15 years old. Do you really want to entrust the exorcism to a 15-year-old kid? 1. The two farmers shrunk back since they also knew this point oh so well. Oh of course, but. The Lord Paladins who visited the village the last time told us to leave everything to you unless it's a truly dangerous matter, Imperial Prince Nim. ... Those stinking paladin as asterisk holes. Just as I began hurling all sorts of curses at them. You've bestowed us with blessings, haven't you? You're an amazing priest capable of that, so we were hoping that you could also purify the village. What were they on about now? I stared at the two farmers with a puzzled look on my face. They noticed my expression and spoke up again. After you baptized us, we weren't struck down by the plague. I tilted my head after hearing them. Well, you two just got lucky, that's all. We've been dumped with this task, to cart around these plague-infected bodies the whole day. But then, rather than falling ill, the farmers began patting their torsos as if it was the oddest thing ever. It's as if we've been filled with lots of energy for the past few days. My tilting head leaned even further to the side. But, surely that's because of the stamina you built up by farming. The injuries we suffered healed really quickly too. But, that's because the folks of this world are especially sturdy, so. Both me and this fool, the two of us are the only survivors from our village. I stared at the two farmers with a dazed expression. It had already been a week since I used the skill, horrifying curse, blessing, on these two. Between then and now, about 20 corpses were brought here. Those must have been their fellow villagers then. Yet, these two farmers who brought in all those plague-ridden corpses were still perfectly fine. Even right now, they weren't wearing those cumbersome masks because they got in the way. The effects of making across the air with my hand and saying Amen was that strong. Yes, it is. The farmers nodded their heads with certainty. Holy cow. Dear Goddess Gaia. Did you feel lazy like me and just haphazardly slap them with a blessing or something? I knew it. I was wondering why so much divinity leaked out of me back then. It seemed that the blessing itself had been pretty generous, to say the least. I crossed my arms and groaned loudly, a skill activated all on its own, and it even has a super awesome effect, too. Pardon. It's nothing. I guess it'd be better for me to raise the proficiency of my skills so that I could use them at will later. That'd be a much smarter thing to do rather than not even knowing that I somehow used my skills. I shifted my gaze back to the farmer duo. Did you say that you two were the only survivors? Then, where are you staying? We're currently residing in a neighboring village. I massaged my forehead. This was a job I had to do anyway, so I figured it'd be better to do it as soon as possible. And as an added bonus, the two of you, help me out. Doing it while I had two additional helpers would be smarter, right? The farmers became somewhat confused after hearing me, but they still nodded their heads. What a bloody spectacular sight this is. We arrived at the farmer's old village. 30 or so shacks greeted us with a portion of them having already collapsed. There were shattered windows and broken doors, various filth and corpses littered their vicinity. A village that would have had a starring role in a horror movie was waiting for us. I observed the conditions of the corpses lying around the village. After turning one of them over, I ran my hands over the damaged parts and tilted my head. Looks like he's been bitten by something. Did an animal take a bite out of this corpse? No, hang on. The bite mark was too small to say that an animal did this. I raised my head and scanned the village. What a relief, there doesn't seem to be any zombies around. The corpses found around the village were either quietly staying dead, or were far too damaged to become undead. I looked at all the puke stains and filth scattered everywhere and scowled real deeply. Since there were so many dead bodies around, I naturally spotted lots of rats gnawing on them too. The rodent closest to me stopped chewing a corpse and raised its head to meet my stare. It had a disgusting stench and red eyes filled with murderous intent, as well as the faint trace of demonic energy coming from it. A zombie. It then bared its crooked fangs and dashed towards me at a frightening turn of speed. It was so quick as if it couldn't wait to bite the crap out of me. I raised my shovel and then slammed it down. The rodent was sliced in half, its torn flesh bouncing around. What's up with this guy? Even though it was in two pieces now, the rodent wasn't dead yet. Despite ending up as a severed torso, it was still trying to bite into my leather boots. I lifted my foot up and heavily stomped on it. The farmers flinched at my actions and shrunk away. Since when? Pardon. I squatted down and picked up the dead rodent before glaring at the farmer duo. This thing was a zombie. A damn undead rodent, okay. So, since when did things like this little guy begin running around in the village? The farmers hastily exchanged glances with each other. Then, while making perplexed expressions, they shook their heads. We don't know. What a refreshingly honest reply that was. Is that information important, Your Highness? They tilted their heads. Well, no. Not really. I tossed the zombie rat away. It wasn't only humans who could turn into zombies. A portion of any life form that died near a negative field would turn into an undead. You wouldn't turn into a zombie just because you got bitten by an undead in this world. However, if the toxin spread in you and you died from that, then sure, there was a good chance that you'd turn into one, but if not, you'd just suffer from high fever. As long as you didn't die, you'd naturally recover. Meaning, it was that sort of an illness, no more and no less. The stench is pretty intolerable though. This rodent, however, was no longer on the level of simple zombification. A seriously thick amount of demonic energy was permeating from within it. Since there was so much, there was a high chance of a human dying from its bites and then turning into an undead later. Was this thing a 100-year-old zombie rat or something? If there was only one, or maybe two of these critters around, other animals or even humans would have easily killed it off, but... ... I shifted my gaze again. I spotted pitch-black shadows coagulating around a certain collapsed shack. Dozens upon dozens of zombie rodents, all with crimson eyes, were glaring at me. Seeing this spectacle caused my eye muscles twitch all on their own. With such a vermin horde around, it had been even stranger to see a village that managed to escape unscathed. You too, are you sure you didn't start a vermin farm or something? I asked the farmers, and of course, they hurriedly shook their heads. Once they also saw the zombie rodents, they began stumbling backwards in pure terror. There is no way. It wasn't like this a few days ago. I remember now. You said that you left this village, didn't you? The farmers quickly nodded their heads. Even if this place is our home village, everyone was already dying from the plague, who'd want to stay here. Our families have left this world a long time ago already, this is why we didn't have any reasons to stay put. We're currently staying in the neighboring village. They readily accepted you too. Why yes. In turn, the village tasked us with delivering those who died from the plague. Oh, so that's why you were accepted. Seriously, man. There's so many things I've got to do now. I glared back at the zombie rodents. Well, there's your evil spirit. Not only that, they're pretty dreadful ones at that too. Hundreds of zombie rats opened their eyes wider. And then, the horde began to dash towards us. My sole weapon was the shovel in my hand. Unfortunately, it'd be impossible to fight them with just this. Imperial Prince Nim, run. While glaring at him, I stabbed the shovel into the ground. I sucked in a deep breath, and as whitish air exhaled out of my mouth, I muttered out the name of a skill. Swamp of Death. Less than 003. Imperial Prince is a gravekeeper -2 greater than Finn. Grandson of the Holy Emperor is a Necromancer Chapter 5, 004. Imperial Prince is a gravekeeper -3. Chapter 5, 004. Imperial Prince is a gravekeeper -3. The divine puddle has been summoned. A voice delivering a message could be heard inside my head. The ground beneath my feet suddenly became mushy. With the shovel as the center, the water began to fill up below and eventually created a smallish puddle. And then, squeal. Dozens of zombified rodents that stepped into the puddle all melted away. Their bodies maintained by the thick demonic energy simply stopped existing, leaving behind only their skeletons. As they slowly sunk into the puddle, they completely vanished from the view. Oh, my goodness. The eyes of the two farmers became huge circles. They walked closer to my side, and while staring at the melting rats, addressed me. I heard that some priests can soar through the air and can even heal a dying person to their full health, but this... I didn't know that you possessed such immense power, Your Highness. Can you also beat up the zombies while scattering light too? Hey, did you guys read a Xiangxia novel or something? I clicked my tongue while looking at them. It wasn't so far-fetched to see them carry around strange notions regarding priests though. I hadn't seen other priests of this world yet, but they shouldn't be on such a fantastical level as described by these two farmers. Yup, they probably should wield a similar level of holy magic as me. I lifted up the shovel and rested it against my shoulder. The swamp of death, in front of me, which would originally create a puddle filled with demonic energy and kill the victims by sapping away their life force, had been altered to summon a puddle filled with holy water instead. That's all good and well, but... anemia. I staggered unsteadily. I've been thinking about this every single time it happened, but man, the amount of divinity spent was nothing to laugh about. I really needed to learn how to control my own powers, but it was kinda difficult for me to figure out the methods to do that when all my holy skills were based on necromancy skills. Still, it sure is powerful all right. I looked down on the zombified rats melting away. I didn't know that holy water could even melt down an undead skin and flesh, actually. I dunked my hand in the holy water beneath my feet and took a whiff of it. What a unique kind of water it was, with an invitingly sweet aroma and all that. You could drink it straight up and it wouldn't cause you any harm. Holy water very effective in curing any illnesses, enhancing your health, and as well as boosting your natural recovery rate. My version was created through a different process from the stuff found in churches or other monasteries, which was made by priests praying their butts off while adding divinity to water. However, the effects should pretty much be the same between the two. It's really annoying to baptize everyone one by one, so I pointed at the holy water puddle and told the two farmers, go and distribute this to the other villages. Around a finger-sized portion should suffice. Have them drink it and the plague should be completely gone. Actually, I hadn't experimented on living people before. But upon seeing that the two farmers were fine after being blessed by me, this holy water should also work pretty well too. You, wanting to drink this? The farmers stared at the holy water puddle. Bits of flesh and bones that used to belong to the zombified rats were still floating around in it. They then shifted their troubled gazes back to me. I don't think both of you are in any position to mind stuff like that right now, said I while staring straight back at them. The farmers seemed to give up as they nodded their heads. We'll distribute them right away. Yup, you should have done that in the first place. Otherwise, I'll be really troubled by you lot. I definitely didn't want this dang plague to get worse than this, after all. I was already losing my sh*t from the increase in the workload you gave me. By the way, why were all these zombies crowding around that particular house? I studied the house where all those zombified rats came out from. Only the skeletal frames of it remained as if the vermin relentlessly gnawed on it or some such. I entered the structure and my gaze immediately lowered down to the floor. That's when I saw a tiny little gap. My shovel slammed down and enlarged the gap, and I began prying it open. I used the tool's handle like a lever and pushed it down, causing the wooden floorboards to shatter. It was then something reddish-black suddenly pounced at me. Brandishing a sharp kitchen knife, a girl covered in a scarlet color grabbed my shoulder and pushed me back. I lost my balance and tumbled on my butt. I even heard my shoulder muscles being crushed. A pair of icy cold eyes were now looking down on me. Without a shred of hesitation, she quickly stabbed down with her knife. God damn it. I reflexively blocked the knife with my shovel. The blade trembled mere inches away from the tip of my nose. I managed to save myself just in time with my trusty shovel. The girl and I entered into something of a power struggle. I thought this village was abandoned. Cold sweat trickled down my face as I glared at the girl dyed in blood. She seemed to be around 15 years old. Who'd have thought that there was still an insane survivor in here? A properly bat sh*t insane one to boot. She must have stabbed and bit the zombie rats to death, as evidenced by the rodent flesh and fur that were stuck to various parts of her body. On the other hand, many gouged out wounds could be seen on her too. It was perhaps caused by the rats biting her. Her irises were constantly shaking about. The glow in them was murky. There was almost no light of life in them at this point. Could she have thought that I was a zombie and attacked me? More cold sweat trickled down. My body was already weak to begin with and I began to tremble. Little miss. You're making a mistake here. Get off me before your noggin gets a good smack. The kitchen knife was getting closer to my forehead now. At this rate, never mind getting pricked in the head, the bloody knife would go straight through my skull. Die. A cold-blooded murmur came my way. The girl, her expression as cold as a sheet of ice, glared at me with eyes full of murderous intent. Looks like you're a bit angry about something, but defending myself any more than this would be tough. Strength was leaving my hands now. The kitchen knife crept closer to my forehead. Cool your head for a bit, all right. I summoned up every scrap of power and twisted the shovel to deflect the knife, and then hit the girl in the head with my weapon. Crack. Accompanied by a rather chilling noise, the girl crumpled into the corner of the shack. I somehow managed to get up and touch my face. Her killing intent was so thick and heavy that I thought she actually did stab me. After confirming that there was no wound, I quickly turned my head to look at the girl. She was now lying on the floor, but her scary glare was still fixed on me. Beside her, I could see two corpses, currently covered by large sheets. I saw that, and my lips began twitching. Holy sh*t. The two corpses were horribly maimed and shredded. It was a pair, an adult man and woman. They had bite marks that evidently came from the rats, but more importantly, smallish knife stab wounds could be seen everywhere on them. This girl, she killed her parents that turned into zombies. Then, she must have hit herself below the floor and endured until now while fighting for her life. What happened? Imperial Prince Nim. The two farmers hurriedly rushed inside. They saw the girl covered in blood and shouted out in sheer astonishment. Charlotte. Oh, dear Goddess Gaia. Oh, goodness me. I looked at the two and grumbled in pure dissatisfaction. You said there were no survivors, didn't you? There was none when we were here last time. Rather than, there was none, it's more likely that you failed to spot her. I massaged my aching shoulders and spoke up. How long has it been since you left this village? It's been about a week, Your Highness. However, we came here 3 days ago. Back then, the whole village had already. I see. She must have at least endured 3 days, Without a doubt, the girl couldn't have gotten any sleep, nor eat and drink anything properly. She must have endured against her hunger and thirst by consuming the zombified rat's meat and blood. This happened all the while the dang zombie rats tried to devour her after sensing her life force. What a tenacious will to live. The two farmers checked her head and cried out after spotting blood trickling out from there. It seemed that the impact from the shovel had been greater than I thought. Don't get all worked up, you two. She's still alive. I grabbed her collars and dragged her outside. Imperial Prince Nim. What are you? I then tossed the girl into the puddle filled with holy water. The cold water must have woken her up as her eyelids faintly cracked open. Drink. One of the farmers hurriedly approached me and spoke up. She's still a young child. Her wounds are serious, if you handle her so roughly. A young child my *s. She's about my age and also, I pointed to the front. Even if she was hallucinating, she tried to kill me. I don't need to treat a would-be murderer so kindly, now do I? However. Hey, kid. The girl's eyes shifted towards me. Drink. I walked closer to the girl and squatted down next to her. Let me be brutally honest with you. Your body right now isn't in a normal condition. You ate zombie rats to survive, and the demonic energy and the poison from them have already spread throughout your body. You're also bleeding a lot too. At this rate, you're going to die and then become another zombie yourself. She had been in a far too close proximity with death itself. As soon as her breathing comes to a stop, she would become an undead for sure. I pointed at the holy water puddle. However, by drinking this, something might happen. You might still be saved. Honestly, this was a gamble that had to be taken. When divinity was forcibly inserted into a body that had absorbed demonic energy, an adverse reaction would occur. One mistake and the body itself would balloon up and explode. But, at the very least, you won't become a zombie. The survival rate might be less than 10%. Now, choose. Either choose to suffer horrendous pain and become a zombie, or struggle so that you can somehow live. I read descriptions of the potential reaction from the interaction of these two forces, divinity and demonic energy, in an old book I found in the monastery. I wasn't sure whether it was due to the special perk of my profession, or because of this body already possessing a certain amount of prior knowledge, but I had no trouble studying books related to magic. I yapped on about the standard knowledge found in the books and looked down at the girl. She was getting tearful as she tried to speak. Mom is not here. Dad, my dad. He's not here too. Teardrops formed at the edges of her eyes. She showed no indication of drinking the holy water. Was she going to give up after everything she went through? You struggled until now to survive, didn't you? Weren't you fighting in order to live? You want to live, right? It's simple. Drink this. Of course, your chances of survival are slim. However, you won't become a zombie. There's no point in dying twice, right? And also, I quietly looked down at the girl and continued on, at the very least. Two people who are no longer here would have wished for you to live on. Those were the keywords that made her move. She finally made her choice. After moving her head with some difficulty, she buried her face in the puddle of holy water. She opened her lips and poked her trembling tongue out to lick it. The moment the liquid entered her throat, her entire body began convulsing. Woo-doo-dee-UK. Her bones broke, and the sounds of her muscles being crushed accompanied her tearing skin. Her horrifying scream filled my hearing. It was so sickening that I ended up frowning deeply. At this rate, she'd go full-on insane even if she managed to survive. What is going on? I stopped the farmers from getting any closer. The girl would end up as one of the two, either a living and breathing survivor, or a corpse that got blown apart. Her skin continuously ripped apart as blood trickled down. While she thrashed about in pain, the holy water on the ground healed her. Her old flesh burned up as it was replaced by new flesh. Her bones repeatedly shattered and realigned themselves. Wouldn't metamorphosis, described in the martial art novels, be similar to this, I wonder? Even as these sorts of useless thoughts circled around in my mind, I continued to silently observe her changes with my shovel stabbed into the ground. 5 minutes passed by. 10 minutes, then 30, and 1 hour later. Her horrifying screams gradually died down. Her convulsion finally stopped and she completely passed out, submerged in the puddle of holy water. Although faint, she was still breathing. Here. She survived it. You could say this was a bit of relief. There was nothing more sour-tasting than watching someone die in front of you. I sighed inwardly and addressed the two farmers. Take her with you. Pardon us. The duo tilted their heads. She's your fellow villager, isn't she? Why yes, that's true. However, a child struck by the plague is a bit. What the hell, seriously? Were they all putting up an act with the concerned expressions earlier? Or were they just being hypocrites? My straightforward glare caused them to shed buckets of cold sweat. Their gazes lowered while they spoke their piece. We'll try our best to talk to the folks from the neighboring village. Good. Oh, and like I said, distribute the holy water too. You mean this? As the farmers looked at the puddle of holy water responsible for causing that bout of convulsion in the girl, their complexions paled. They probably ended up recalling her rather violent reaction just then. That only happened because she swallowed up demonic energy. Oh, wait. Could it be that your new village has people who eat zombies? Wowzers, talk about stomachs of steel. And no, your highness. That's not it. The farmers shook their heads side to side. In that case, you don't have to worry about it causing any side effects. So, let's prioritize in stopping the plague first, said I before getting up while dusting myself. I pulled the shovel out from the ground and perched it on my shoulder. Oh, right. Install lots of rat traps too. It looks to me that the cause of this plague is the zombie rat bites. 1 or 2 might not be an issue, but when there are hundreds of those things. Just imagining it gives me the heebie-jeebies. Right. Just imagine hundreds of those swift-footed critters rushing in at you. No one would be able to deal with that sh*t. You gotta decrease their numbers, even if it's only by a little. Also, send the word out to Ronia as that's the nearest domain run by a lord. The feudal lord there will send out a priest to investigate the origin of the plague, at the very least. I mean, he surely won't sit still when a deadly plague is spreading in an area around the Holy Emperor's grandson, right? We understand, your highness. Good. And with that, this saga should be over. The need to shovel away, lug around dead bodies, or to perform burial rites, the need to perform all the extra physical hard labor should be gone soon. Now that I created holy water, this year's plague should be stopped pretty easily too. My peaceful daily life should get going once more. That's what I thought. Until the following day when hundreds of villagers arrived in front of the monastery, that was. Did they want to express their gratitude regarding the distribution of holy water? Nope. The villagers, all of them carrying expressions of despair, cried out. I Imperial Prince Nim. Please save us. Zombies are in our village. It seemed that the once serene rural villages had become a zombie's den overnight. Less than 004. Imperial Prince is a gravekeeper -3 greater than Finn. Grandson of the Holy Emperor is a Necromancer Chapter 6, 005. Imperial Prince is busting heads -1. Chapter 6, 005. Imperial Prince is busting heads -1. This couldn't be anything simple at all. In just a single night, the village was decimated, leaving behind 100 or so survivors. They all crowded into the narrow and dilapidated monastery. Kids, old folks, housewives and the likes were busy offering desperate prayers inside the building. Meanwhile, men were helping me lug around the dead in the cemetery. Once things had calmed down sufficiently enough, the representative of the village chief, came up to me. Thank you for aiding us, your highness. I was flustered. The village was decimated even before the holy water could be distributed. I had a mountain of things to do now thanks to this development. Wasn't there a paladin stationed in the village? Said I, remembering that there was a paladin residing in the biggest village here tasked with monitoring me. After the incident happened, we sought him out. However, his current whereabouts are a mystery, said the village chief as his response. What about sending the word out to the Theocratic Empire? Sure, it might have been a banishment, but still, an imperial prince was staying here. Paladins promptly showed up just because the owner of this body rampaged around a bit, so there was no way the higher-ups would ignore the advent of a zombie wave. At the bare minimum, they should dispatch a night order or something. That is, we tried to send a messenger, but he must have been killed by the zombies during his journey. There are zombies hiding along all of the roads leading to Ronia. Even the contact with the nearest sentry post has been cut off too. The zombies of this world were pretty amazing then. The paladin in the village monitoring me went missing. Thus, the zombies seized this opening and attacked, and they even managed to cut off the exit. Did that mean they could use their heads? If this was true, then these bastards were even scarier than the ones from the movies, those that were capable of running around like marathon runners. Also, finding the origin of this plague would be next to impossible if it turned out there was a separate entity with enough intelligence that commanded the others. How many zombies are there? There were about 30 of them. That's how many we saw when we were running away. The village near the monastery actually consisted of 4 separate satellite villages. I went to an already decimated village yesterday, so this meant that in just one night, the remaining 3 had basically been wiped off the map. If there were 30, did that mean there were around 10 in each village? Or, maybe they worked together to attack the villages instead. It wasn't as if we were dealing with a zombie den or something, so there was no real need to get scared by an undead that couldn't run and were only capable of flailing about ungainly. Also, you wouldn't turn into an undead just because you got bitten once too. Okay, so what now? We'd like you to contact the Imperial Palace, Your Highness. But didn't you say that all roads have been blocked? Wouldn't offering a prayer be sufficient? Like, with some sort of magic. How unfortunate, but I didn't know any convenient skills like that one. The villagers were looking at me with hopeful eyes, but it was my job to break the bad news for them. Such a thing is obviously impossible. You said that a wave of zombies showed up, right? In that case, we don't have any choice but to pull our socks up until paladins come to rescue us. If not, we'll all be dead meat. I didn't want to get their hopes up, so I honestly told them our current position and options. Thanks to that, they all fell into panic. Some became really pale, while some wailed uncontrollably. Hell, some of them even began screaming too. The villagers were in despair. This was quite obvious really, since they were about to die from the plague, or become the next meal for the zombies. Even if I enjoyed similar attributes with the undead, the continuous appearance of zombies would still be dangerous for me in the long run. If I managed to survive alone when everyone else perished, it would look rather peculiar to other people, wouldn't it? This meant that the current situation remained unfavorable whether it was for the villagers or for myself. Please help us. Your Highness. Aren't you the grandson of the Holy Emperor? Even if that's true, I was but a mere regular person now. I stared at the village chief. These villagers seemed to be taking the banished imperial grandson for granted here. A banished member of the imperial family was no different than a commoner, who lost all of the status. The exiled people who arrived in places like these would have to work as lowly gophers running errands for the villagers, and they wouldn't even receive any compensation in return. There was no prior case of an exile taking revenge on the villagers either. They probably thought that they found themselves a nice little servant here. I wasn't that unhappy about their request, though. The villagers seemed to be willing to help me out too. It was just that, if these folks were shameless enough to think that I should, obviously, do it for them, then I wasn't planning to smile and bear it all out. In that case, I should put forward a beneficial condition for me. I smirked and stared at the village chief while using my mind's eye to confirm his status window. Name, Parok. Age, 75. Speciality, snitching, farming, petty tricks. Plus currently in a scared state. My smile became one filled with contentment as I studied him. Fine. I'll help you. The 2 farmers from the night before were smiling brightly now. On the other hand, though, the remaining men carried unmistakably bleak expressions. Their reactions were rather lukewarm at best. Even if I pounded on my chest and declared, "Who am I? I'm none other than Holy Emperor's grandson," I wouldn't be able to convince anybody. Because, I was the Magnani Imperial Prince after all. I used my royal background to beat up servants and sexually assault maids. Hell, I even tried to rape a lady in waiting too, who in their right minds would trust me. The village chief hesitated greatly before opening his mouth, evidently having decided to grasp at straws with no other options available. Then, we shall be in your care. He probably figured that it was better than nothing and they might as well believe the priest and follow his lead. It sure was a rather arrogant attitude. I guess one could attribute his shamelessness to all those times he ordered around exiled formerly high-ranking gophers as he pleased. Such a habit must have been deeply ingrained in his bones by now. Well, it didn't really matter. Helping him out was the only way I'd be able to spend some peace and quiet myself. Besides, I wasn't going to, personally, deal with the zombies, anyway. However, I have a condition. The village chief flinched before tilting his head. With a confused expression on his face, he asked me a question. When you say a condition, I want you to start handing over some necessary funds. It's rather unfair that I've been performing free services until now, right? Don't you agree with me? Are you asking me to pay you wages? But everyone who was exiled here so far were. I quietly stared at the village chief. The silent pressure I gave off forced him to shrink back and nod his head. I understand. Don't rat on the paladins later, got it? As long as I stayed in the monastery, I'd get a bit of food and water for free. However, that was pretty much it. I had no funds to spend for myself right now. Once every month, a traveling merchant would show up in the village, so it'd be a good idea to fix up the monastery with the funds I'm going to receive later. The Theocratic Empire had already given up on me anyways. I might end up spending the rest of my life here, so shouldn't I try to spruce up the place with a few decent pieces of furniture? Oh, and one more thing. I pointed at the dilapidated monastery. I want you to fix that while you're at it too. Pardon. The village chief looked at the building. Although it was quite old and worn down, the building was still large enough to house 100 or so of his fellow villagers. This meant that repairing it would require a considerable sum. After a lengthy deliberation, the village chief finally spat out a groan and nodded his head. I understand. Within my limits And, you need to periodically provide supplies for free. I'll see what I can do within our means. Nice. With that, all my problems had been sorted out. You see, rainwater that leaked into the monastery had been causing me a lot of grief for a long while. Not only that, the provisions I received as compensation for maintaining the cemetery were only potatoes and vegetables. I should be able to get myself some meat now, and since winter was coming, I might as well get the villagers to diligently bring me my deserved rewards so that I wouldn't have to go get firewood personally. Your Highness. Imperial Prince Nim. While I was in the middle of my chat with the village chief, a man hurriedly ran over towards us. He shouted out with a pale expression, "The zombie horde is here." I was stunned to hear this. Zombies were actually coming here. This meant there was no need to go over where they were personally, judging from how they were gathering here in order to prey on the living. They're pretty loyal to their base instincts, then. This was a relief. Actually, I didn't have to search around and purify them one by one this way now. The amount of work I had to do decreased because of this. Nice. All of you, get your tools ready. The villagers, including the village chief, all began to tilt their heads. Their confused, dazed gazes were focused on me. What are you, UHM, talking about, Your Highness? I shrugged my shoulders after hearing the chief. What's up with your expressions? Didn't you ask me to sort this crisis out for you? Why, yes. But, why? His voice trailed off with the words, "Why are you throwing around such an ugly word like tools at us?" The corners of my lips arched up. It should be obvious, right? Yup, so bloody obvious. I had 4 jobs, as it were. 1. The Imperial Prince of the Theocratic Empire. 2. A gravekeeper. 3. A priest, at least nominally. And finally, a necromancer. None of these were the kind of professions where you'd march to the front lines and perform a sword dance or something. From now on, you lot are going to do some zombie hunting, that's why. Quote. Exclamation mark. Quote. The village chief and his fellow villagers stiffened up in an instant. Don't you worry. It's not like you'll become a zombie just because you get bitten by one. It'll just sting a bit and you'll run some high fever for a few days, that's all that will happen. You can rest easy because my heart shall ache alongside your pain too. The village chief forced out a smile as cold sweat trickled down his forehead. Why, Your Highness? This is no time for jokes. You said you'd help us earlier, so. I shifted my gaze over to him and grinned refreshingly. Did it sound like a joke to you just because I smiled? He openly formed an expression that cried out, "What kind of a doggish tea is this?" Well, if you don't like it, you can forget about it, then. I stared at him and cackled loudly in a rather evil manner. Well-built men gathered in front of the monastery. There were about 50 of them in total. Each one was armed with farming tools, logging axes, saws, or hunting bows and arrows. They were all built rather sturdily, perhaps owing to the fact that they were farmers, woodsmen, or hunters during their daily lives. Nice. They didn't forget to pack their weapons before running away despite the urgency of the situation. The survival instincts of this world's denizens were pretty outstanding, indeed. Oh. About the equipment you took out from the monastery, make sure you don't damage them, alright? I'll be charging you money if you break even one. The villagers were now carrying fed-up expressions. I cleanly ignored them and simply nodded my head in satisfaction. Nice. This should suffice. They might be zombies, but as long as we aren't dealing with animal types, we should have no problems as they are all very slow. Also, even if there were animal types mixed in, their attack power should still be limited overall, so it didn't really matter either. Alright, everyone. Let's take our time with this. Your safety should be your top priority. So don't be too tense about hunting zombies. If it gets too tough, just help each other out. As long as we pace ourselves, no one will get hurt, and... It was then I reflexively blocked my nose in a hurry. A truly horrendous stench was wafting out from the distance. Demonic energy was reverberating within the air like the disgusting stench of death. I cautiously shifted my gaze towards the forest. Eyes glowing in crimson hue were slowly surrounding the perimeter of the monastery. Soon, the staggering zombies marched out of the dense fog. Their numbers were in the several hundreds. Why the hell are there so many? I called out to the village chief, who happened to be backing away from sheer terror at the moment. Oi, Mr. Village Chief. Why yes. He looked back at me with a pale face. Didn't you say that there were only around 30 or so back in the village? That is, that's what we saw. Even the chief himself looked confused, evidently not understanding what was happening here. I began massaging my forehead. No, one of the villages was completely decimated, so, what's the total populace of the 3 villages combined? The village chief hurriedly counted by raising and folding his fingers. Well, that is, the biggest village has over 200 folks, while the other ones have between 50 to 100. It should be at least over 300. Okay, so, since there are 100 survivors here with us, and you saw about 30 zombies. In that case, where are the rest of them? The chief flinched and stiffened up as he dazedly stared back at me, then muttered out helplessly, I don't know for sure. We were too busy running away, so. With this, it's pretty clear to me now. A portion of the escaped villages must have been hunted down, it seemed. Or maybe, these creatures simply wandered into the land of the dead spirits. Well, the very distant northern tip of the frontier wasn't called the haven for the undead for nothing, after all. My eyes twitched as I observed the slow, lumbering march of the zombie horde heading towards us. The villagers were crying out to me in sheer panic now. Why, Your Highness, what should we do? Imperial Prince Nim. Should we run away? The village chief butted in at the end and asked me. I couldn't help but massage my temples even harder. Is there any other way to deal with zombies? No, there isn't. Even when a horde like this is coming. The chief wiped away his cold sweat as he replied, an event like this one rarely occurs, you see. If we're faced with such a crisis, we simply inform the feudal lord and wait until he dispatches his troops. I couldn't help but form a miserable expression upon hearing that. Why did my workload have to increase like this? Hang on a minute, could it be that I'm paying for all the blasphemous crap the previous owner of this body committed in the past? Although I was just kidding now, I couldn't help but feel a bit bitter after thinking about it. It was possible that my situation was exactly the result of that. Since magic existed for real in this world, I couldn't discount the possibilities of gods really existing too. Not that I was religious or anything, but if gods really did exist, then there was no way they'd do nothing when a supposed believer cussed him out, right? You Dumba *S grandson. I facepalmed grandly. The crime of blasphemy this body's former master committed was pretty damn hefty, to say the least. If I was really paying for his transgressions, then hell, I was neck-deep in trouble here. Ah! The goddess of love and mercy, Gaia. When I shouted this out, the village chief and the men all looked at me. Was it because I offered a prayer, just now? Their eyes seemed to have a renewed light in them. They probably found priests using divine powers in front of the undead rather reassuring. Indeed, the holy men and women of this world did pray before gathering the divinity to cast their magic, didn't they? However, I was different. I refreshingly trampled on the expectations the villagers held of a priest like me. Love and mercy, my ass. If you're putting me through a ringer just because I cussed you out once, then I'ma cuss you out even more. You cheapskate stinker of a goddess. Less than 005. Imperial Prince is busting heads -1 greater than Finn. Grandson of the Holy Emperor is a Necromancer Chapter 7, 006. Imperial Prince is busting heads -2. Chapter 7, 006. Imperial Prince is busting heads -2. The complexions of the villagers instantly paled. They were probably stunned silly after witnessing the Holy Emperor's grandson grandly blaspheme the goddess. If high-ranking church officials were nearby, then I'd have nothing to defend myself with when they either collapse from pure unbridled shock or try to arrest me for blasphemy. I could hear someone among the villagers whisper, could it be that the Imperial Prince brought this plague upon us? It wouldn't be all that surprising to see the villagers think that a calamity befell on them as punishment for the Holy Emperor's grandson committing blasphemy. I could only dry cough and look towards the front. The zombie horde was coming. Name, zombie. Age. Specialty, biting, clawing. Plus currently in an instinctively ravenous state. My mind's eye returned a truly sloppy information window. However, it was enough. As implied, these creatures were slaves to their primal instincts, capable of only biting and clawing with their hands. The men from the village should be more than enough to deal with the lot. Heek. But, the only problem right now was that they were in a terrified state. They began faltering back while voicing their dissatisfaction to me. Your Highness, this is impossible. How do you expect us to fight them? We're not a priest like you. I kinda understood their position. If not for my profession of being a necromancer, I'd be shush tting my pants by now too. For the time being, I ignored them and silently glared at the zombies. This prompted one of the scared villagers to shout out. I can't do this. We might survive if we run away now. If I take my daughter inside the monastery and run, we might. The man stopped yapping suddenly, his eyes growing larger. That was because he noticed one particular female zombie staggering around in the middle of the horde. My wife. The man formed an expression of despair. Tears flooded down his cheeks as he began to wail. I observed the woman in the midst of the zombies. Half of her face had been ripped off. She looked pretty gruesome, what with various parts of her body riddled with bite wounds. Although unfortunate, the woman was no longer his wife. No, she was just another walking dead now. I ignored the sobbing man and placed the shovel on my shoulder. While doing my best to look unperturbed, I raised my voice. Wow, that's a lot of zombies, alright. Leaving him alone like this will cause a serious issue later. Killing him quickly and ending this calamity right now is for the best, really. I forced the corners of my lips to arc up, but man, acting wasn't easy at all. Even I was feeling a bit tense right now. We weren't talking about 1 or 2 zombies here, but several hundreds. Getting bitten wouldn't simply end with a bit of pain either. You'd really die if a whole bunch of them started biting you. I began inhaling deep breaths in order to settle down my nerves. But then, I can't do this. I just can't. The sobbing man loudly shouted at me, I know it's impossible for you lot, too. He then yelled at the rest of the villagers as if to lodge a protest. Pointing at the zombie horde emerging from the forest, he continued on, they were our family members. Our friends, our neighbors. How do you expect me to kill them? I scanned the villagers. Unrest was rising up among them. This was quite problematic. Not only were they falling into a bout of pure fear, they were even losing the courage to wield their weapons as well. I quickly opened my mouth, they're already dead. Nothing will change if you ignore reality. The man was startled by my words, and began to glare at me. His tearful eyes were now filled with murderous hate. What a headache this is, said I, before walking up to the man. I lightly patted him on the shoulder and did my best to sound as gentle as I could be. Fine, since you don't want to fight, you'll run away instead. Do what you want. I won't stop you. Once the man heard my permission, he shifted his gaze back to his zombified wife, and then he started backpedaling once more. However, you better stay sharp so that your zombie wife doesn't hurt your little girl. Those words stopped the man dead in his tracks. I glanced at him and continued on. I'll say this again. That thing over there is no longer alive. I pointed at the zombified woman, and the man turned around to look at his former wife once more. She looks pretty gruesome on the outside, right? Well, too bad, she looks even worse inside. What do you think is happening to her, really? You see, the mind's eye skill didn't only tell me the target's specialty. Her corpse is rotting away while her soul has become a wandering spectre that's howling out from suffering right now. Maybe it was due to the effects of the necromancer profession, I was also able to see the soul of the departed as well. Distorted souls overlapping the hundreds of zombies were screaming out in pain. This was one of the reasons why I made graves and performed purification ceremonies. Without the ceremony, these souls would never be saved and just continue to scream every single day. She's suffering. The man's eyes trembled. I nodded my head, obviously. She's become an undead that harms other people, who in their right mind would be happy about that. Quote. If you let her be like this, she's destined to wander around forever as a spectre, never to be saved. Her corpse will rot and only her skeletons will remain. She'd remain as an undead for a very long time with no one to save her. I picked up the discarded farming tool and pushed it back to him. If that's the case, how about you lessen her suffering? Your wife probably wants to close her eyes in her husband's presence. Wouldn't you say so? The man was no longer looking at me. He silently stared at his zombified wife, his hands gripping the farming tool tighter and tighter. Tears fell as his expression crumpled even further. This was the face of a man in agony. However, his eyes had stopped wavering and his gaze towards his dead wife had transformed into a glare. He must have made up his mind now. I patted him on the back. The dead should remain dead, while the living should go on and live. I then glanced at the rest of the villagers. I don't care if you decide to run away. However, you better discard the notion that doing so will guarantee your survival. These aren't your run-of-the-mill zombies. They're smart enough to block all the exits, don't forget. You think you'll be able to evade such zombies? Nope, it's utterly impossible. Most of those who escaped elsewhere other than the monastery had already turned into zombies. Which meant that trying to escape from here now wouldn't get you very far. In that case, there's only one way out of this. I raised my shovel and pointed at the zombies. My eyes swept over them as I spoke up. We round them up and smack them dead one more time. This is the only way to protect your family, friends, and loved ones and to save those wandering souls. I ended my speech with a bit of a smirk and the men began gritting their teeth. Even though they were still trembling in fear, no one was backing away now. This was a satisfactory result. I guess you all came to a decision then. I stabbed the shovel on the ground, grasped its handle with both hands, and while shrugging my shoulders, I addressed the villagers. Let's end this as quickly as possible. Our job is simple. Kill the zombies and give them a proper burial. Don't you worry about getting bitten though. I'll bleed in my heart for you. And as an added service, I'll provide you with holy water too. Was it because I sounded sarcastic? The villagers began cussing me out. He's not even a human. How can he act this way? Oh, I'm sorry. What can I do when this is the real me? However, just who am I? Aren't I the imperial family's magnanny? Just because it's not your family. Ahaha, you should be grateful that I'm willing to step up for you. If it was someone else, not only would he have run away by now, he'd also have chased you all out from the monastery too. I warmed up my muscles. Getting a move on while their minds were made up was the smartest thing to do. Who knew when their fighting spirit would start wilting due to the already present sense of agitation? Let's end this quickly. I grasped the shovel with both of my hands. The dead probably wished to rest quietly too. So, don't get killed though. You'll only increase my workload. Charlotte grew up in a happy family. She was renowned for her honest and hard-working ways in this small village that was located far north in the land of the dead spirits. In the mornings, she would help her mother out by preparing breakfast and drawing water from the river. In the afternoons, she'd help her father by entering the forest to cut some firewood. That very fateful day began the same as every other day. She finished helping her mother prepare breakfast and went to the river outside the village to get some water. While struggling a little with what she was carrying, she returned to her house. It was then, a rather familiar noise entered her ear. Blurg. Ooick. Blurg. Charlotte was startled by the sound and quickly shifted her gaze to the side. The next door uncle was clutching his stomach while vomiting out everything in his tummy. His wife was beside him, gently patting his back with a concerned expression on her face. A sour, stinging stench strong enough to make Charlotte instinctively block her nose wafted about. The girl formed a worried expression of her own. Tom Arducci is also sick. The autumn and winter seasons were the time of plagues. Even Charlotte's father was struck down by the illness himself and was suffering in pain right now. Don't worry, my girl. I'll be fine after a week or so from an illness like this. Charlotte trusted her father's words. In all honesty, she too had contracted a plague last year and had to go through a tough time, hadn't she? However, look at her right now, wasn't she still alive and well? This was nothing more than a trial for one to overcome so that they could enjoy another year in health. While feeling worried, Charlotte tried to talk to her neighbors. Hello there. The neighbor Arjuma flinched at Charlotte's greeting. She even formed a scowl on her face. Without saying a word, she shot back a wary glare and went back inside the house along with her husband. Charlotte felt just a little bit lonesome then. She'd always smile and share greetings with her neighbors, but during the plague seasons, everyone would become as unfriendly as one could get. But then again, they were probably worried about the plague infecting someone else. Even if they were already suffering from it. After thinking of this, Charlotte tried to enter her home in a hurry. Squeak, squeak. She lowered her head and found a rodent busy biting at her leather shoe. She frowned a little and kicked the vermin away. The creature was flung towards a storehouse nearby. This was when she discovered dozens of glowing eyes in the gap of the storehouse's open doorway. Ah! Just as Charlotte formed a stunned expression, the rodent that she kicked screeched out loudly. Kiek. The howl was so monstrous that such a little body couldn't have possibly produced it. She was frightened by the screech so loud that it rang in her eardrums. She even dropped the metal bucket she was carrying. Reflexively, she turned around and ran. Dozens of rodents chased after her. She hurriedly dashed inside her home and shut the door behind her, locking it firmly in the process. Slam. Boom. Bang. The rodents slammed their bodies against the door. Mom. Dad. Charlotte's face was pale from fright. She quickly backed away from the door. Even then, she continued to call out to her parents with a frightened voice. Unfortunately, they didn't reply to her call. What did return, though, was a horrifying scream. Charlotte was shocked by what she heard and hurriedly ran into the kitchen. Almost immediately, her whole figure froze up. Her mom, who was holding a kitchen knife and should have been preparing the family's breakfast, her neck was being ripped apart by her father's teeth. But, why? Her mom weakly muttered out to Charlotte as tears fell from her eyes. Ah, run, away. The girl stood in her spot, her entire figure quivering without pause, and yet, she still resolutely shook her head. Run, away. I'll ask someone for help. Charlotte looked at the front door. Rodents were still pounding away on it. This meant she couldn't go out that way. She quickly approached the nearest window. Through the shut window, she shouted out as loudly as she could at the neighboring houses. Help us. Mom, my dad. She saw people peek out from each of the houses. However, it was only for a short while. They closed their curtains and ignored her. Woo, oh, ah. It was then that she heard a bizarre grunt coming from behind her. Flinching ever so slightly, Charlotte slowly turned around to look. Her dad was unsteadily standing there. His mouth, which was ripping into her mom's throat only a second ago, was now dripping with blood. His now dead eyes were staring straight at Charlotte. Ah. Her zombified father pounced on her. She couldn't remember what happened properly after that. In the faint, fragmented bits of memories flitting in and out of her mind, she was running into the kitchen to pick up the knife. That's where she confronted her now zombified mother. Charlotte wielded the knife, and when she finally came to, both her father and mother lay dead, filled with stab wounds. She stood there, dazedly staring at the two unmoving corpses. Save me. Blear, I need medicine. What's this? So many rats. The screams of the villagers reverberated outside the window. Charlotte turned her head towards the front door. The vermins had gnawed through it to create a hole. Once the door broke, the pack of rats, with their crimson teeth, pounced on her. ... Heo. Charlotte opened her eyes and shot up from the bedding. Cold sweat rolled down her face as she quickly scanned her surroundings. Her hands reflexively flailed about in the empty air. Somewhat embarrassingly, no rodents were pouncing on her. Charlotte panted heavily, her complexion deeply pale. Where was this? Her shifting gaze took in the sights of the monastery's interior. What happened? And then, the aunties and old ladies were taken slightly aback after seeing her wake up and came closer. Less than 006. Imperial Prince is busting heads -2 greater than Finn. Grandson of the Holy Emperor is a Necromancer Chapter 8, 007. Imperial Prince is busting heads -3. Chapter 8, 007. Imperial Prince is busting heads -3. Charlotte, how are you feeling? An auntie and grandma came closer to check up on Charlotte's current condition, and asked her. Oh my goodness, look at all this cold sweat. Oh. Her fever has gone down. That's a relief. Why don't you lie down for a little while longer? You must be starving. Here, have a potato at least. We only have these right now. The auntie gave her a plate with a potato and a kitchen knife on top of it. Charlotte felt confused and flustered by these ladies and their nursing attempts. What happened? Where was she? Why was she here? What about her mom? Her dad? As her unbridled confusion intensified, she shielded her forehead from the pounding headache. Just as she grew more flustered. Kyark! Someone suddenly screamed out. Charlotte was startled awake and she reflexively shot up from her spot. A woman was pointing outside the window while backing away in fear. They're coming. No. They're already here. All the women inside the monastery looked outside their closest windows. Charlotte too had quickly shifted her gaze outside and observed the current situation. She saw numerous zombies lumbering towards the monastery. There were so many of them too. The complexions of everyone inside the building grew as pale as a white sheet. Some screamed while a few others hurriedly looked around the area, perhaps searching for a place to hide. However, Charlotte reacted differently from them. Zombies. She reflexively reached out and grasped the kitchen knife next to the potato, just before she started dashing towards the monastery's exit. The womenfolk were stunned by her actions and quickly stopped her by hugging her from behind. Charlotte, it's dangerous outside. You mustn't. Even though they were trying to stop her, they ended up getting dragged forward instead. Charlotte seemed to be gradually getting stronger with each passing step. This was a display of sheer physical strength that no 16-year-old girl could produce. The boys watching this scene play out also intervened and they finally managed to stop her. Charlotte flinched in surprise and ungainly flailed about. A part of this was because she finally lost out in strength, but at the same time, she didn't want to accidentally harm the others with the knife. This was why she stopped struggling. Even then, her gaze remained fixed outside the window. Her wide-open eyes were locked on a certain boy standing outside the building. She saw him jump high up while raising his shovel. And then, he slammed it down. The head of a zombie split open as it collapsed to the ground. What are you all doing? Aim for their heads. This ain't the time to worry about preserving the corpses or whatever. The boy's yell prompted the terrified villagers to grit their teeth and start swinging with their farming tools. Soon, all sorts of tools began to land on the zombies. Eventually, though, someone lost in the contest of strength against the zombies and got bitten. The boy gritted his teeth and grabbed the back of the man's neck to forcibly pull him away. He then swung the shovel. It landed splendidly against the zombie's head, making it stagger before collapsing on the ground. The boy raised his shovel high up and smashed apart the downed creature's skull. This sight deeply stunned Charlotte. A boy about the same age as her, no, maybe 1 or 2 years younger even, was stepping up to hunt down the zombies before the older and stronger men could. Don't let up. If you've got time to complain about the pain, then kill one more zombie instead. His manner of speech was also quite unrefined too. The grown-ups glared at the boy, but still, they attacked the zombies nevertheless. One by one, they took down the pack of undead. These slow-footed, staggering zombies were subjugated unbelievably easily. The boy must have been feeling quite fatigued as he barely managed to stand by leaning against his shovel, his breathing heavy and rough. It was around then, the ladies that stopped Charlotte earlier clicked their tongues. What's this? That Imperial Prince Nim, he knew how to hunt zombies. Well, he's a prince from the Imperial family, so of course he should know how to hunt down zombies. The still scared ladies continued to chat among themselves. Their words stunned Charlotte again, though. He was an Imperial Prince. Now that she thought about it, she did hear about a rumor that a Magnani Imperial Prince Nim had come to visit the monastery in the hills some time ago. She locked her gaze at the boy's back once more. TL, in first-person POV. The villagers bellowed out scream-like howls. They swung the farming tools held in their hands to stab and smash down. Every time this happened, the zombies' skulls were crushed and shattered. As rotting flesh splattered everywhere, the villagers backed away with expressions uncomfortably close to despair. Their breathing were extremely heavy and disarranged, but their eyes were still diligently scanning the 100 or so zombie corpses strewn about everywhere. Some plopped down on their butts, perhaps no longer having any spare energy left to even remain standing up. Others embraced the headless corpses while sobbing, too. The respective corpses must have been their family members or acquaintances. Even though everyone suffered from the pain of grief, we somehow managed to defend against the zombie attack. I confirmed the conditions of the villagers. Some were injured, but no one died. Now that's a relief. I stabbed the shovel on the ground, leaned my back against it, and spat out a long sigh. This was tough. Seriously tough. If I knew what was in store for my future, I would have chosen the warrior profession during that game-testing part-time job instead. It had been infinitely more preferable than this, Necromancer, one where I had to mind everyone else's glares just to use a skill or two. Alternatively, how wonderful would it have been if I arrived in this place as a Superman? One that boasted sky-high skill proficiency too. You worked hard, Your Highness. One of the farmers came closer to me to pass along a leather water skin filled with water. Oh, thanks. I gladly received it and washed my hands and face before quenching my itching thirst. During all of this, I kept glancing at the farmer. And through mind's eye, I confirmed his name. You said your name was Grill. The farmer Grill flinched and asked back with a puzzled expression. Did I tell you my name before, Your Highness? Yeah, you have. Nope, you haven't. Maybe he was happy about me remembering his name, because Grill suddenly formed a grateful expression on his face. Thank you, Your Highness. There's no need to thank me. However, an Imperial family member remembered the name of a measly farmer like me, so I... Hey man. You should hold your own profession in a higher regard. Let me tell you, being a farmer is an important job. Grill seemed to be a bit stunned. After a few seconds, he nodded his head energetically, looking as if he was flustered. Now that I think about it, didn't this guy take away that girl who got infected earlier? What happened to that girl? Did she survive? That girl? Ah, you mean Charlotte, Your Highness. She's safe and sound, and I think the ladies inside the monastery should be taking good care of her. That's a relief then. I glanced at the monastery. For a moment there, I felt someone's gaze lock on me from one of the windows, but I couldn't see any faces. Should I blame my current state of mind for that feeling? I glanced back at the extremely dead zombies again. The stench was so bad that I ended up deeply frowning. The level of demonic energy they had was simply too much for mere corpses that became the Walking Dead literally overnight. How strange. What is, Your Highness? This plague, I mean. Even if a plague was spreading around recently, a zombie wave of this scale suddenly showing up couldn't have been normal at all. Hell, I'd wager that a plague on the level of biblical proportions wouldn't be this severe. Even if we're near the land of the dead spirits, it's too bizarre to see these many zombies to pop up like this. It was a really close call this time. If this keeps up, though, we'll be completely annihilated. When you say, completely annihilated, you mean? Everyone except me will die. Grill's complexion greatly paled. If we don't find the cause quickly, that'll happen for real. I'd say around 2 weeks minimum for the fiefdom of Ronia to detect something was off and dispatch people over here. I wasn't sure whether we could last that long or not. Grill hurriedly asked me in a petrified voice, what should we do next? Well, we'll have to endure somehow. Or find the cause. But that's for later. Let's give them a proper burial first, starting with cremation. You mean right now? I looked at the villagers before glancing back at Grill. Everyone was dead tired right now. Even this guy was making the face of a man asking for a lengthy break. However, if they rested now, it'll get only harder to perform a proper purification ceremony later. We better finish up quickly when we still have many willing hands available. Also, I stared at the unmoving corpses and slightly frowned. They're suffering even now, you know. We should ease their pain as soon as possible. I directed the villagers to dig out a burial pit next to the cemetery. The mass funeral was simple and concise. After gathering the corpses, they were cremated, and then the remains were poured into the pit and buried. A lone wooden signboard acted as their tombstone. Now normally, a high-quality headstone would have been used instead, but unfortunately, we lacked enough energy to make one. While everyone was watching, I stared at the new grave and offered a silent prayer, my hands still holding onto the shovel. This was the purification ceremony, remembering the departed, and praying for their comfortable, eternal rest. I worked until the following morning to finish up. After offering the last prayer to the grave, I turned around to address the villagers. Let's take a break for a little while before hunting down the rest of them. It'll be better to trim their numbers as much as possible. Even though I was in the middle of my speech, I didn't forget to study the villagers' reactions. A gaze that I didn't enjoy receiving landed on me first. Some looked rather dazed while the others looked quite surprised. I tilted my head, and this caused the villagers to either cough awkwardly or avoid my gaze. I frowned a bit and summoned the village chief. Hey, Mr. Village Chief. Yes, Your Highness. Is there something bothering you? The chief sauntered over and formed an awkward but still considerably smooth smile. Something about this atmosphere felt weird to me. I formed a slightly pouting expression as my reply. The chief simply waited for me to finish what I wanted to say, completely disregarding whether I made such an expression or not. Did any strange events happen around here in the last few days? When you say strange events. Like, for example, a strange object showed up or maybe a stranger came to visit the village. I wonder. I don't remember anything like that. The plague started doing its rounds about a month ago, but there wasn't anything suspicious back then. In that case, did this contagion really spread through the already infected vermin or the wild birds? However, I had this strong suspicion that rather than Mother Nature, someone had artificially set this crisis in motion instead. Is there a necromancer nearby or something? I muttered to myself, but my words caused serious panic and fear to spread among not just Grill and the village chief, but to the rest of the villagers. In this place, necromancers were literally calamity personified. The grim reaper of the plague, the soul-stealing devil, etc., etc. With the exception of a particular kingdom, everyone else in this continent branded them as criminals. One of the laws of this land even stipulated that you wouldn't be tried for murder if you killed a necromancer without a good enough reason. To put simply, I'd be as good as dead if my profession as a necromancer was to be revealed here. A necromancer. Oh my god. You think that such a disgusting thing has been hiding in our village? Oh, I'm sorry for being so disgusting. It wouldn't be strange for your head to go flying for lèse majesté against the Imperial Prince though. It's just my conjecture, I calmly responded. But if there really was one, that would certainly be troublesome. Because if he decided to lay low for a while, then everything would go down the crapper for sure. However, there was a pretty good chance that he was nearby. You'd have to be close by in order to control zombies after all. Too bad, I had no idea how to search for him. Unless we were talking about a dedicated search team composed of priests and paladins, sending these clueless villagers out there to search was basically the same as feeding the man tasty new treats. Well, I could be wrong with everything and this whole situation could be a naturally occurring plague that simply spiraled out of control. Either way, the problem remained the same: how do we find the origin of it all? Let's stay put for one night and observe. Tell everyone to take a break. And we'll need rotating sentries just in case. We were all as tired as anyone could be. We fought off the horde of zombies, then dug the ground the whole day and moved the corpses, and finally, we even went and performed a mass funeral too, so our physical and mental limits had been reached already. At the moment, none of us could really do anything. I'm going to catch some ZS. If something happens, come and wake me up. I told both the village chief and Grill before turning around to head towards the monastery. Kyahik. A scream resounded alongside a thunderclap. I was startled awake from my sweet slumber inside the monastery. The pitter-patter of raindrops rang around in my ears. My vision remained dark and dim, but the momentary brightness brought on by the lightning strike illuminated a person's face right before my eyes. Pale white hair and crimson eyes alongside an expressionless face like a sheet of ice, all of these belonged to a certain girl. As if she was taken by surprise, her brows rose up higher as she stared at me. "What is it now?" I asked her. The girl showed some signs of fluster as she quickly left my side. It was then, the monastery's doors burst open and Gruel rushed in. "Your Highness. Are you trying to make me deaf?" Perhaps due to all the fatigue, my whole body felt as heavy as a wet sponge. Even my mind was drowsy right now. The farmer's loud shouting-like voice rang inside my head and I was getting dizzy from it. "What happened?" I asked Gruel, but at the same time, took a glance at the girl. She was openly looking at me with a pair of sunken eyes while squatting by a corner. The glare she had was cold and sharp. Wait a second, that girl, wasn't she the one who ate all those zombie rats and survived? Her eyes were filled to the brim with venom. She's not blaming me for something, right? Your Highness. I'm listening, okay. What's going on here? What's with all this ruckus? The farmer Gruel then urgently updated me on the situation. Someone's been kidnapped by zombies. Less than 007. Imperial Prince is busting heads -3 greater than Finn. Grandson of the Holy Emperor is a Necromancer Chapter 9, 008. Imperial Prince is hunting a witch 1, Part 1. Chapter 9, 008. Imperial Prince is hunting a witch 1, Part 1. Kidnapped by zombies. With a dumbfounded face, I looked through the monastery's window. It should have been the middle of the day right now, but thanks to the relentless downpour, it was quite dark outside. Since it was so poorly lit outside, one's range of vision should be impaired because of it as well. It kind of felt off that the zombies took advantage of the weather to not kill, but kidnap a person instead. Now normally, zombies wouldn't try to age a person like a fine wine before devouring the poor sucker, so they must have been aiming for something else here. However, just a single villager. Did you say it was just one person? Gruel nodded his head. He continued on with a deeply flustered face, yes, just one. It's a young lady who moved into the neighboring village around 3 months ago. She's, you know, that person you tried to score with. I tried to do what now? This was my first time hearing about this story. Gruel snuck glances at our surroundings before whispering in my ear, well, she's such a looker after all. I'm not sure if you can remember what happened, but after you got rejected by her, the shame led you to, hang yourself. I couldn't help but squeeze my eyes shut just then. This was so damn embarrassing. The dude killed himself not because he felt despair at his doomed fate, but because some girl rejected him. I could now understand why the Holy Emperor abandoned this foolish grandson of his. Since he probably treasured the family's honor more than his life, he would have definitely wanted to forget all about this magnanimous grandson for good. I groaned helplessly as I massaged my temples. Okay, so how did she get dragged away? Pardon. That is. Gruel looked flustered, unsure. Actually, the person who was feeling more flustered than him was me. Villagers were now standing guard outside the monastery. So, it'd be safest to stay indoors. Anyone even thinking of stepping foot outside right now was obviously not right in the head. The young lady is very kind-hearted, you see. Her personality won't let her forsake any injured people around, and this was why she said that she'd go and procure some medicinal herbs and... What was up with this annoying development? A bite wound wouldn't pose any threat whatsoever with a sip of holy water. And yet, this woman personally went out to procure medicinal herbs. Gruel continued on, that's why the villagers wish to form a search party. Aren't you guys scared of the zombies? She was the village's herb gatherer and many people were saved due to her hard work, you see. Many of us are indebted, and she's one of the most beautiful women in the village too. And also single, Your Highness. Meaning, all the love-struck men wanted to rescue her. Actually, there was something bugging me about this as well. If the zombies really kidnapped her, then I should find out what they were really up to. I needed to find out whether this was a mere simple kidnapping or perhaps that woman and the zombies were involved in something shady. I get it now, but can you guys even track her down? We have an experienced hunter named Hans with us. If it's him, then it should be possible. What will you do, Your Highness? Form the search party. I'm coming too. You're going with the search party? Gruel formed a surprised expression. Yup, he was probably taken aback by the fact that the Imperial Prince wanted to go rescue a maiden who rejected his advance. Especially so when he already knew what the boy's personality was like. Never mind whether she rejected me or not, I can't even remember it anyway. Besides that, a person's life is much more important, don't you agree? I said, sounding quite righteous for a moment there. Honestly though, I was thinking of something else. There must have been a reason for the zombies to not devour the woman right away, but instead drag her somewhere else. I thought that just maybe, searching for the kidnapped woman could lead us to the solution to this crisis. Something just felt off to me, which was why I needed to investigate it. A search party had been hastily formed. It's this way. Over here. While wearing a pair of worn-out leather shoes and a robe, I made my way across the rainy, soggy forest on foot. The location the 10 members of the search party arrived at while wielding burning torches was a cave located pretty far from the monastery. The hunter named Hans nodded his head as he looked at the bits of flesh and blood left on the grass, as well as the muddy footsteps on the ground. It must be here. Wow, you sure have located it so quickly, haven't you? I retorted sarcastically. Actually, it wasn't so much as having located it quickly, but more like, Lord, to this place, or so I thought. These zombie assholes were smart as hell, so they must have deliberately left all these breadcrumbs for us to follow. What was the goal though? Was this a diversionary tactic to split the villages? If not, maybe lure away small numbers and hunt them down one group at a time. I stared into the cave's interior, my mind still filled with several questions. It was a pretty deep negative field where the outside light couldn't reach. No matter how deep it was, though, it failed to disguise the stench of rotting corpses busy stinging my nostrils. Although faint, I even sensed demonic energy too. Without a doubt, we discovered the den of the zombies. This place is definitely it. The origin of the plague must be in here too. Never mind the zombie rats, there was a pretty good chance that the zombified humans and animals could be found inside. Us stepping inside this cave was basically the same thing as presenting a veritable buffet for the zombies to enjoy. There was no need to trigger the trap if you knew it was waiting for you. Should I go and get the oil for cremation from the monastery first? With that, I should be able to get rid of the zombies in one go. The cave even sloped downwards too. By setting a fire and letting it burn for half a day, maybe not all of them, but hopefully we'd get to kill about half of the zombies inside. However, my opinion brought about a nervous question from the villagers. Your Highness, what would happen to Morian in that case? Morian. When I mouthed the unfamiliar name, Grill next to me whispered the answer, that's the name of the kidnapped lady. Was she still even alive at this point right now? The men were clearly getting anxious as they nervously paced about. That lady was their benefactor, and also the object of their crush. So yeah, they should be anxious all right. Too bad, I simply couldn't endanger everyone just to rescue one person. I lifted the torch and pointed it at the interior of the cave. Look, you can tell that this place is a negative field even with just a casual glance. Which means it'll be seriously dangerous. It's where the undead can receive buffs, you know. Buffs. The men tilted their heads. They were puzzled by such a strange term. I replied. It's where the undead can grow stronger. More importantly, it was so dark in there that you couldn't see properly. The staggering, flailing zombies would present a greater danger than before in such an environment. At the very least, I had no reason to risk this much uncertainty. Grill studied the reactions of his fellow villagers before whispering back to me, what will you do now, Your Highness? This cave was just too suspicious. I hope there isn't a zombie bear or something in there. It'd be a definite no-no if that's the case. A damn zombie bear. The current me wouldn't be able to properly defeat such a thing. I wasn't even a warrior, so what was I supposed to do against such a monster if it really appeared? The villagers were now looking at me. I guessed that they wanted me to make the final call. Even they judged it to be too dangerous to just blindly rush into the cave. Right now, it'd be for the best if we stepped back. Since we now knew where the origin of the plague was, we could afford to go and prepare ourselves adequately first. We weren't just going to sacrifice 10 lives to rescue one villager. We returned to the monastery for now. Marching straight in there will only result in needless casualty. It was then a seriously thick stench suddenly stabbed into my nose. While stunned silly, I instinctively looked behind me. A chill ran down my spine. Just as my eyes shifted towards the forest, a black shadow pounced on me and bit into my shoulder. Stab. Sharp fangs dug in and tore into my flesh. Soft skin ripped open and my muscles were gouged out, shoulder bones were crushed in the process, too. A walk. I screamed out loudly. Then, my vision rotated upside down. Something was forcibly dragging me into the cave while biting into my shoulder. Grandson of the Holy Emperor is a Necromancer Chapter 10, 008. Imperial Prince is hunting a witch 1, Part 2. Chapter 10, 008. Imperial Prince is hunting a witch 1, Part 2. Imperi, Nim. Pre, Resk. Villagers had no time to react at all. Their voices grew increasingly distant. My vision grew darker. A huge wolf was biting into my shoulder, its eyes glaring at me. With the awful stench of a rotting corpse and disgustingly thick demonic energy added on top, too. God damn it, it was a zombie wolf. Let me go. I held the shovel shorter and stabbed it into the creature's neck. Because my posture was all wrong and also with my bitten shoulder, I couldn't muster enough power behind the strike. My attack didn't even inflict a small nick in the monster's thick hide. Getting dragged any deeper would be too dangerous for me. By being isolated inside the cave all by myself, it would mean I'd become surrounded by zombies and get devoured for sure. Screw this. I focused divinity on my hands, and then activated the skill, Horrifying Curse. I felt the divinity immediately drain out of my body. As the sense of dizziness filled my head up, I could hear a faint voice. You have granted a blessing. Now wasn't the time to mind my anemia or whatever. The blades of the shovel glowed softly. My digging tool was now imbued with the reverse effect of the Horrifying Curse, blessing. You stinking son of ABTCH. The shovel carrying the aura of divine blessing stabbed into the zombie wolf's neck. Stab. Forget about the smell of burning flesh, the dang thing actually melted away. The sensation of a heated metal chopstick melting down plastic got transmitted through my fingertips. The shovel dug in even deeper. However, the zombie wolf still didn't let me go. You stubborn son of. I pulled the shovel out and stabbed the damn wolf again. Eventually. Boom. I finally managed to extricate myself out from the damn thing's maws after its neck completely melted away and its body collapsed into a heap. I rolled ungainly on the floor several times. The pile of bones and rotting corpses acted as cushions to soften my landing. While pressing my head on the ground, I screamed out, "Awak! This FC King hurts. This, son of ABTCH. Seriously man, the pain was no damn joke." My trembling hand reached up to my wounded shoulder. I flinched when my fingers touched the gouged out flesh. Almost as if I got burned by something, intense heat rose up from the wound. I couldn't tell whether I was screaming out or grunting from the pain when I muttered to myself, why do I have to go through this sh*T anyway? I held my shoulder and injected divinity into the wound. This was the basic healing skill that most priests possessed. I also added the skill, Horrifying Curse, on top, too. No, maybe I should just rename it to Blessing instead. I felt the divinity drain out of my body, and in turn, the wound healed at a visible rate. The demonic energy permeating within my muscles caused a negative reaction and my skin ruptured, but that only lasted for a short while. Broken bones realigned as new flesh grew to replace the old one. That freaking hurt. This adverse reaction between divinity and demonic energy healing the undead's bite wound would always be accompanied by horrible pain. Only after the wound was completely healed without a scar did I breathe a sigh of relief. No, hang on. I shouldn't be relaxing right now. Maybe I should blame the instinctive fear I felt for the sudden bout of talking to myself syndrome. I scanned my surroundings, but my vision remained dark. I couldn't see anything properly at all. But that too lasted for only a short while as well. I quickly got to confirm the locations of the creatures shuffling towards me, thanks to mind's eye. Hhhh. Yup, it was a horde of zombies. Zombies, halfway to becoming skeletons after most of their flesh had rotted away, were currently staggering and shuffling towards me, their jaws falling open as if they discovered a tasty treat in front of them. I'm screwed. I was already pretty fatigued, but now I had to fight him too. Ah, the goddess of love and mercy, Gaia. Please just spare me once, will ya? I begged the silent goddess as my hands grasped the shovel tighter. The whole cave was filled with a disgusting stench. Rotting corpses and discarded bones were literally rolling around on the ground. As an added bonus, I could even sometimes see the Walking Dead snack on them. Zombies that were busy feasting on the discarded bones and flesh discovered me and stood up from their spots. They staggered while coming in closer. Thankfully, there were no fleet-footed zombified animals among their midst like the one from before. Man, I might go crazy at this rate. As it turned out, I got dragged pretty deep inside the cave. This meant that I shouldn't wait for the villagers to come and rescue me. I raised the shovel up before stabbing it down on the ground. The divine puddle has been summoned. With the shovel as the center, a holy water-filled puddle gushed up from the ground. It rapidly spread all around me in a diameter of around 5 meters. The approaching zombies stepped into the puddle and began to unsteadily totter about before falling face first to the ground. They then slowly melted away. Unfortunately, another zombie stepped on top of the fallen zombies and got closer. Using their fallen comrades as footholds, these damn things slowly shuffled towards me. What a bunch of tenacious evil creatures, mere slaves to their instinctive desire to devour the living despite knowing that they would also perish in the process. This was why I felt so spooked too. I quickly swung the shovel at the ones coming in closer towards me. Along with a dull crack, a zombie's head shattered, its rotting brain matter scattering about. I knew that this was simply me buying time and nothing more. I needed to completely, utterly destroy them, and do it over a wide area too. The plague of debilitation. I took a deep breath before muttering these words out. After raising the shovel up, I stabbed it back on the ground and closed my eyes. A large rune letter suddenly appeared on the ground beneath the zombies, and then, particles emitting bright light exploded upwards. You have carried out a wide area blessing. The light particles that rose up from the ground came in contact with the zombies, causing their rotting flesh to burn away. One by one, the undead turned into ashes and dispersed away. 1, 2, 7, 10. Nice. It's working. At this rate. Too bad, just as the hopes of survival formed in my heart. Boom. My bright expression turned gloomy in an instant. I raised my head up. Coo. The damn thing was at least 3 meters tall. It had shaggy fur covering its thick hide, alongside large arms and a humongous torso. A bipedal creature that possessed hook-like claws now stood before my very eyes. I muttered to myself, utterly dazed by this sight, a goddamn zombie bear. Yup, it was indeed a zombified bear. I didn't know which species of bear it was, but... Name, King of Gluttony. Age. Speciality, biting, crushing, smashing, scooping out internal organs. Plus currently strengthened through necromancy. This guy wasn't something I could handle at the moment. A pretty vicious creature had turned into a zombie, it seemed. Yup, I'm losing my mind here. Every time the zombie bear took a step forward, I in turn also took a step backward. Even though the light particles from the wide area blessing touched its body, the damn monster had no problem moving its body. It then crushed the melting zombies underfoot and stepped into the puddle of holy water. Its fur did somewhat melt, but due to its thick hide, the effect was minimal, to say the least. This guy was on a whole other level altogether compared to the zombies I had been dealing with so far. Should I run now? However, if I showed my back against it, I got the feeling that it'd suddenly pounce on me with a frightening turn of speed. The scarier creatures other than humanoid zombies were the undead predators. Why? Because they possessed faster movements than regular humans, that's why. If I tried to run towards the sloping exit of the cave, my back would be ripped apart in no time at all. And I'd probably get killed in an instant. I gritted my teeth while my hands held the shovel even tighter. A man can die once, but for a second time. Dying once from electrocution was already more than enough for a lifetime. I definitely didn't want to die again after being crushed by a damn zombie. I extended my hands as I gathered more divinity. The resurrection of the dead. As soon as my words came to an end, the divinity quickly spread around the cave's interior, causing the corpses found within to writhe. Undead zombies slowly stood up while emitting white light particles, their breaths filled with divine aura. Oh. And then, the cave was rocked not by the bone-chilling howls of the undead, but pure and clean hymn-like singing instead. Less than 008. Imperial Prince is hunting a witch 1, Part 1 and 2, greater than Finn.